Hello Stitchy friends, it's Shari. Today I have an applique tutorial to make this Haunted Mansion decor using the Poshta Design Haunted Mansion stitching dies. So here is the whole set of dies. I did not use the little ghost or the boards that you can use to board up the windows or the door. I am going to be making an embroidery hoop using this Hey Pumpkin fabric from My Mind's Eye and Riley Blake. I've already sewn the two pieces together, and I will be using a 7-inch embroidery hoop for my project. Now this is the Costume Party Color Story. I used some of the colors from this. I did not use the green or that really bright orange felt. Now I did use the bright orange floss because it didn't really match the fabric that I'm going to be stitching on. So here are all my pieces cut out, and I added in marmalade, which is the color that will be the windows. I also added in pixie, which is that light purple. And I used fig, which is the door. I just wanted that door to be another purple color because I really wanted those rooftops to stand out. Now, I thought that this was furrow in the Costume Party Color Story, but it's actually a new color. So this is actually furrow that I used to cut out my rooftops. And we're going to start with the windows. Now I'm starting with the window in the center. This fills in both the windows in the middle. And what I was doing there, you can see it's not quite square. It kind of tapers at the bottom, and that is how you know that's the bottom versus the top. Once you try to line up the holes, it would become very obvious. Now the first thing I want to do is to stitch the window panes that cross in the center before I stitch around the window and before I stitch the window to the purple panel. Now all of my stitches for the most part are going to be a running stitch one direction, and then I'm going to go back the other direction and fill in the parts I skipped. So for this one, I went straight across that horizontal line from right to left. Now I'm coming back, but as I come to the vertical parts, I'm going to go down and back up to the center, and then I'll go up to the top and then back down to that center horizontal line. Then I can continue on to the right across my horizontal line until I get to that other vertical window pane, and I'll do the same thing there. So again, I'm going down, back up to that center horizontal line, then I'll go up to the top and come back down. And then of course, once I get back down to that center horizontal line, I will continue on to the right and finish it off, making it completely solid. Now, luckily, I am stopped right on the right side, so actually that's where I'm going to line this up with that purple panel. And I'll just start right in the center there. There's no need to start in a corner. You can start anywhere because you're going to do this running stitched all the way around these windows. Now, the one thing to remember about these is there is that centerpiece that goes down. So what I did was I kind of went around this first window down that center. And I actually kind of did a figure eight. I went around the window on the left. When I got back to that top kind of center area, I actually filled in the stitches on the top part of the right window and then worked my way around. There's really no right or wrong answer. You could do the whole perimeter and then come back and do the center. Since your stitches are hidden on the back and we don't have to worry about hiding anything on the inside or seeing it on both sides on this project, you could stitch it really any way that works for you. I was just kind of having fun snaking these stitches around. So you can see I've gone back up the center. I actually need to tie off because my string is too short. So I'm going to add another string and I'll tie that off. But I'm just continuing around until I get those frames completely framed in. Now you could do this in a contrasting color like I'm doing so it looks like a frame around the window, or you could do it in a color that matches the body of the house. I think either would work. It just depends on the look you're going for. I wanted this to really stand out since I'm using those kind of pastel non-traditional colors for my house. But if you wanted to do kind of a dark, kind of spooky house, of course, using those dark colors would blend in and would look really fun too. So I'm just going to tie this off now that I've gone all the way around. I'm going to tie those two tails where I started a new thread, and then I can trim those off, and then I will tie off this one as well. Just going, actually, I don't need to go under. I ended up back where I started, so I had a tail I could tie to. Now we have 3 other windows. We need to start each of these in the same way by stitching the window panes that go through the center. I'm going to do the 2 arched windows first, so you can see I'm doing one here, and then once I get the window pane stitched, I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the body of the house just like I did the windows up top. I'm not going to do that with the gable shaped window just yet though, because that one requires us to also stitch the roof on. So I will do this to both of the sides of the house and just tie all of my tails on the back side and trim off those tails. So there is the right side of the house. I will repeat that same process with the left side. So now we have our sides done, and I want to move on to the door and get the door attached as well. Now the door is a darker purple, but to stitch the details in the center of the door, which creates kind of the panels, I am using the floss that matches the body of the house. So I am always taking my 6 strands of floss and splitting it into 3. I know I did not say that before, but I always use 3 strands unless I'm doing a bead. Sometimes I use 1 when I'm doing a bead just so it's not fat. And there are times when I might use 6 if I'm doing something decorative, but usually always 3. And I'm doing my running stitch around these little boxes in the door. Hopefully you can see that. I went all the way around, now I'm going back in the other direction. And these are just going to create 4 little rectangles that look like the panels of the door. That's partly why I'm using a contrasting thread so that it stands out a little bit. Just depends on the look you want. I'm actually going to tie that off since I've gone around 1 square, but I'm not going to cut it, and I'm just going to hop on over and do the next rectangle. So now I've got all those rectangles stitched, so those are just the details inside the house. I was kind of looking at what it would look like to do X's from corner to corner. I think that would be a fun look, but I decided that's not what I wanted to do on this project. So I will just tie off my string and trim off the ends. Now I need to attach this door just like I did the windows, lining it up on the back side of this main body of the house, and then we're going to stitch around it. And I decided to keep with my frames being that dark color and make it match the window frames. So I'm just lining up the holes. For me, it's easier to kind of pick it up and look at the light through those holes and just get that started. And I'm actually starting in the top right corner so that I don't have to tie off at the bottom edge. So I'm going to stitch across the top from right to left, down the left side, then I'll come back up the left side, across the top, and then I'll go down and back up on the right side, back to that corner where I started. So I'm back to the corner where I started the door. You could tie off if you needed to, but what I'm going to do is kind of jump up here and attach the small roof that goes above the door. And we're going to stitch the 2 horizontal lines. We're not going to do the corner because that's where the side of the house attaches. So I'm going to start right there where that purple meets that furrow. And I'm just going to go right to left again, running stitch across, not all the way to the corner again, because we want to leave that open for when we attach the side of the house. And then I'll go back. And once I get back to the other side, I'm actually going to jump up to this top right here and go straight across there. I don't need to worry about skipping anything on this one. I was checking with my other pieces to make sure it didn't overlap anything, but the only part I need to worry about is where that roof kind of sticks out on the side. That's where it's going to attach to that pink colored piece of the house. So I went running stitch right to left and then back left to right to finish it off. So I have those 2 horizontal lines of this roof stitched. And now I will tie these off. So now I'm moving on to that window up top, and as I said earlier, it has a few more pieces we need to stitch together. You can see I did do the window pane, but we have the roof, we have the window, we have that main body of the house, which is that purple color that the roof layers over top of, and there's also that little gable detail. So you could do this in a couple different ways. You could put the window on the back like I did the others. I decided to put the window between my two layers. I thought it made the window look like it was popped out, I guess, a little bit, another layer of felt rather than being recessed back into that hole. So it kind of makes it look like it is in a roof that's maybe sticking out a little bit from the face of the house. So I'm lining up the window, then I'm lining up the roof. I'm not going to pick up that little gable detail just yet. I'm looking at my backer piece to see what horizontal line I can stitch. So I can stitch the horizontal line, but not out to those little points of the roof because that will be where I attach it to the backer piece. And then I can also stitch around the window. So where I decided to start was in the bottom right corner of the window. You can see there I'm putting my needle through there, making sure it lines up through the window, through the purple piece, and through the roof. So I'm going through 3 layers here. And what I'm going to do first is actually stitch from that corner over to the right side of the roof as far as I can go, and then come back to that corner. So right there's where I stopped. I can kind of use my backer piece as a guide. Then I'm coming back to the corner where my window is. Got those 3 pieces to go through right there. And what I'm actually going to do is stitch across the bottom of the window. So that's why I'm kind of pulling it up and taking a look, flipping it over, looking through all the layers, making sure I'm hitting the holes. That's going to help it line up later as I get towards the top. So you really want to make sure you're getting through all those holes and lining it up perfectly, especially when you're going through a bunch of layers like this. And once I get through my window there, it gets a little easier because then I just have the roof and the purple piece to worry about. So I'll stitch over to that far left corner as far as I can go, not all the way out. So I'm leaving like 3 holes open, and then I will stitch back to the bottom right corner of the window. Again, that's where I started. I know this is really hard to see because in this case, I am using floss that matches the felt, but I'm trying to narrate where I'm going with my stitches. So I've gone all the way across both directions. So that line, that horizontal line across the bottom of the roof is completely solid now. And I'm just going to tie that off so nothing moves. Now I'm ready to go up and around my window. So I'm going up this straight vertical side. Before I get to the corner, I want to pick up my little gable piece. You could use a contrasting piece. For this one, I just wanted to layer 2 pieces of the same on top of each other, so you kind of get some depth to it, but it doesn't stand out as much. Once I get to that corner, now I can come up through that little gable piece. Now you could stitch it to where you catch the ends of it and it's all one continuous thing. I'm actually stitching mine to where the stitches go up underneath. So the very edges of this little gable detail are loose and they're kind of just hanging out there. I didn't want my line to cross over them. Not that I think you would see it very much since this is a matching color, but when I get to the corner here, I'm going to show you. So I'm coming back down. I've gone across my gable, coming down that vertical part on the left side. I'm going to go back up. And hopefully you can see this. When I get here, I want to go underneath the edge of my little gable so that you don't see my stitch. Then I can go up to the point and back down, and I'll do the same on the other end of that little gable detail. So I came out from underneath it so that it's kind of hanging out there and it's not tacked down. Hopefully you can see that there where I've skipped it, went underneath, and back around. So now that the center part of the house is done, we can work on the sides. So I've already trimmed off my ends and tied off the roof up there. Each of these sides are different, so you want to make sure that they're on the proper side. You don't want them flipped at all. There are these little holes. They match up with the little roof that goes over the door. So that's how you know if you have them on the right side. Now I've already attached the right side just at that little roof line, just where I am using that dark colored floss, and I have my clips holding it in place. So I'm going to show you what I did here on the left side that I did on the right side. We need to attach our roof to the pink part of the house first using a running stitch across that horizontal area. I have my large piece, that's the backer piece, there as a guide because I know I need to stop short. You can kind of see where you stop short. You stop at the edge of the pink. Then I'm going to go back to the right until I get to the hole that overlaps the little roof, which is going to be at the top of the little roof actually. So I'm coming up there and I need to attach this. So I'm coming up through that hole, and this is actually the center hole. There's 3 holes, the top corner, the bottom corner, and the middle. And I ended up in the middle with this particular stitch. I'm going to grab a couple more clips to help hold this in place because right now my thread is only coming through one hole, and I want to make sure that all these holes line up. So when I get to the point of stitching down the sides of the center of the house, that everything is lined up properly. So I will just finish up these few stitches in that dark floss that holds the little roof to the side of the house. So these are all the internal stitches that are going to be the dark color. Now I'm ready to change floss colors and stitch down that vertical line of the house. So I am using the coordinating floss for the purple, and I'm starting where this roof touches the house. So I'm not starting all the way at the top. I'm going to start about 3 or 4 holes down wherever it touches, and I will just do my running stitch going down that right side. And I'm just going to skip ahead because this is a really long video and I think you'll all understand my running stitch at this point. But what I did do here is instead of going back up, I went ahead and skipped down to the bottom part of the house because I did not feel like there was a need to tie it off and start a new string. I had plenty of string. So I'm skipping down and I'm making sure I'm coming out underneath that roof. I don't want the purple stitch overlapping the edge of the roof. I think that would look a little funny. So I made sure I came out underneath that roof that goes over the door. I'm continuing that running stitch down to the bottom. And since I'm making sure things line up, that's why I'm flipping it a lot so I can put my needle in the hole from the back side too. Then once I get to the bottom, now I'm going to go back up to the top and finish off this stitch all the way up the right side of the house on the purple piece. So once I've done that right side, I obviously need to do the exact same thing on the left. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm starting in that same place where the roof meets the side of the house. I do still have my clip there, but that's not really necessary once you get those stitches started. So I'm going to remove that and do the same thing on this side that I did on the left side. Go all the way down to the bottom, to the ground, and then back up. Okay, now that our house is all stitched up, we need to do our embellishing. Honestly, this is a part I forget often. For this, I'm using the Costume Party Color Story Beads and Sequins pack. I'm using those black sequins. They have an iridescence to them, which is really pretty. And I'm using one strand of floss. I'm just tying this off because I don't want to make my floss go all over this house. So on each little rooftop where I'm adding them, I'm just tying it off each time. So I'm using one strand of floss. I'm using a thinner needle with a sharp point since I'm piercing through my felt and not just through already cut holes. I'm using those iridescent sequins, but I'm using the white beads. Actually, they're not white, they're clear with a little bit of iridescence. And you can see when I put that clear bead on there, it doesn't blend in quite as much as if I used the black bead that matches. And come up through the sequin, go through the bead, back down through the sequin, and then tie it off. So that is what I'm doing here. And I have another little sequin here. I like that these sequin and bead packs have two sizes of sequins, so they're not all exactly the same size. I always like to make a little cluster of a big sequin and a small sequin. So my house is all done. I'm moving on to the trees. Now these are cut from the Falling Leaves 2 die set, so they are actually leaves, but don't they make the most perfect tall topiary trees that you would see next to a mansion? I cut these from Clementine. This is the lighter orange in the Costume Party color story, and I'm going to use the darker orange thread, which I believe is tangerine, to stitch the details in the center of the leaf. So I'm just going up through the center vertically. Now I did not start at the very, very bottom. I started at the bottom of the leaf, not the stem. And then as I come back down with my running stitch, when I get to the spot where those veins kind of go off to the left and the right, I will stitch those. A lot like I did the window panes. I went through the center, and then when I got to those points, I went out, back to the center, and then out and back to the center. And that's what I'm doing here with the tangerine floss. Then once I get back to the middle, I'm going to continue going down till I get to the next two little veins that go to the left and the right. And I'll just repeat this all the way to the bottom. And I'm only doing the interior part of the leaf. The exterior part of the leaf is going to get stitched when I put these on the fabric in the hoop. So of course I did the same with the other leaf, and now I'm adding some sequin embellishments. I am doing the orange and I'm going to call it more yellow, even though it is kind of just the lighter orange. I'm adding one of each color to each of these little trees. And I did the top right on one, the bottom left on the other, so that they look different because the trees themselves are very symmetrical on each side of the house, and I just wanted a little bit of variation in the embellishments. Once I had those sequins on, I did decide that I wanted a third little bit of something, so for this, I'm just using a bead. So I have kind of the rule of three. I have three different little embellishments, and they are all a different size, and this is just the most appealing to me in my projects. So I added the little dark orange bead to each of those, and now I have that little trio of embellishments. So here is my fabric. I sewed the black to the pink. Now I did put my interfacing on the pink first and remembered I needed to sew the black. Otherwise, I probably would have put the interfacing on the whole thing. However, I'm only stitching on the pink, so it worked out totally fine. I have a 7-inch embroidery hoop, and I am just going to go ahead and put my fabric in the hoop. And then I will be stitching directly into this hoop. And I'm just using my house to kind of center it up where I want it to be and make sure it's not too high or too low in the hoop. Then I can take that back piece and get it all centered up on my fabric, and I'm going to tighten it up. And I actually never took this out of the hoop once I got it in here. I tightened it up really tight. I did all my sewing and I never removed it. So that being said, if you want to decorate the hoop in some way by painting it, I would probably do that first so that you don't have to take it out and remove it. Also, the other thing I forgot to do was to trace the inside of the hoop for the piece of felt I put on the back, but I'm going to show you how I took care of that problem here in just a little bit. Of course, I'm going to start with my trees, and I'm using my solid house as a guide here for where to put my trees. Now, to hold them in place, I like to use a little bit of tacky glue. So I just put a few dots of tacky glue on the back, and that will kind of hold it in place. I'm going to do the same to the other. On this one, I added a few more, and I actually made sure I put some glue where my little strings were and my beads so that they are definitely not going to come loose. And I will just place this on that background too. Now I don't need to keep my house here. I'm going to stitch the trees first. I'm just using that for placement. And I wanted a contrasting stitch on the trees. I decided to go with that dark black thread And of course, I'm using 3, and since I'm stitching into some fabric that it has interfacing, I am switching to a needle with a sharp point because I need to pierce through that interfacing and through that fabric. For the trees, I'm starting down here on what I'm calling the trunk because we're making trees, not leaves. And I'm going to stitch down those few little stitches on the trunk of the tree. There's about 3, and then stitch back up, and then I will start to stitch around. Now I do find that stitching onto the fabric with the interfacing does take a little more time because we obviously don't have a hole on the back that we can easily find with our needle. We do have to find that hole and pierce through that fabric. So you're going to see me turn it over a lot as I do this. The other thing I did on the trees is I only did the running stitch in one direction. I did it one direction and decided I liked that kind of skip of the stitches to where it skips every stitch, and that's just the look I wanted on my tree. You could go back around and complete that line of stitching. You could do a blanket stitch or an applique stitch. I think there are lots of options. You could just make this very decorative and change it up a little bit from the house. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other tree. Now they match, and now I can put my house on here. And part of the reason why I use the solid piece is to help line it up. You could probably just take the house in all the pieces that we have and stitch it on there, but felt kind of stretches a little bit in all those pieces. This is going to make sure our house stays nice and straight because I have that background piece as a guide for my front pieces. So just like the trees, I used some of my turbo tacky glue and stuck that down. Then I can use this to line up my house. And what I decided here was I wanted to give it a little bit of volume and stuff it slightly. So what I did was I took my quilt batting, and I'm actually just going to take the center part of the house and trace a little piece that goes in the middle. So it's going to be a long, tall piece, and I just trace it with a Sharpie because you're never going to see any of this. And then I'm just going to cut it with my scissors. It really doesn't matter the shape of it, just that it fits kind of in the inside or the center part. You're actually going to see that I will go back and add a few pieces of batting on the sides too when I get to that point. Now that center piece is kind of popped up from the other pieces because they're layered behind, so it already naturally has a little bit of dimension from the pieces on the side, but this is just going to give it a little bit more. And again, I'm using my glue to help hold stuff in place. This glue is super thick. It doesn't come through the felt, and it works great to just hold it in place, especially something like this. I can't use a clip. I don't want to use a pin because it's going to kind of mess with the felt and make it not flat. So the glue is going to be perfect. Now for the house, I am going to use lots of different colors to stitch this on because I want it to match my stitches of the pieces that I put together. So I'm starting up here on the roof at the top, and I'm using that floss that matches the furrow felt because that's what I use along the bottom of the roof, and I want it to all match. When I get to the sides of the house where I have the pink and the purple, you're going to see me switch to those colors of floss. Just like the trees, I'm just going in and out, running stitch all the way around, and when I get to the other side, I'll come back and fill that all in. So I have one last stitch over here. I've gone one way and come back. You can see on the back side, it's nice and solid. It's not going to look even on the back because we don't have holes on the back, so it might look kind of crazy, but it doesn't matter. No one's going to see that. Okay, while I have my dark floss out, I'm going to do the other two little roofs, the left and the right, in the same way. Now for this one, I'm making sure I come up between the purple that's layered on the front and the furrow or the roof color that's layered behind, because I don't want that to go across the purple. So I went around and back on one side, now I'm doing the other side, and this is where that back piece really helps you line it up and get it straight. It's kind of moved and stretched a little bit because we have all these pieces coming together on the front, so it's not perfect, but the back is perfect because it is one piece that's die cut. and I can use those holes to help make sure that my little roof is lined up. So I've gone around all the roofs with the dark color. Now I have purple because I have about 4 little stitches on the left and the right side of the center part of the house that I didn't stitch before because they are on the outside edge, and I need to go through and stitch those now. So I pulled out the purple that matches what I've already done, and I'm going to fill in those last little stitches on each side of this part of the house. So now that I've done those 2 little pieces of purple at the top, I'm moving down to the bottom of the house, which is also purple, and I'm going to stitch that purple floss from the left to the right across the bottom of the door. So it is going to be contrasting across the door. If you wanted it to match and kind of disappear, you would just need to change colors here. You could have also taken the black and made one little stitch to take that frame of the door all the way to the bottom, which I actually didn't think about till after I was finished. But if you wanted that to look continuous instead of stopping before it gets to the bottom, you could do that. So I went all the way across, now I'm going back, and this will just stitch the bottom part of the purple to the hoop. Now the last little part that I need to do are the 2 sides, and I will stitch those in pink, but I did have some extra space kind of in there just due to the pieces put together for the top versus the back, and I decided to cut down 2 little pieces of quilt batting and stuff those in each side of the house to give it a little bit of volume. So once I have those 2 little scraps in there, and it's just in the pink part, obviously I've already stitched down the roof, and I really didn't need it in the roof part. I will pull out my pink floss that matches that pink felt and thread the needle. Again, this is always 3 strands of floss. And for these, I'm going to actually start down here in the corner because I know I can get that corner nice and lined up. So I'll start down here in the corner, leave a tail, and I will do my running stitch up the side of the house, then back down, and once I get back down to the corner, then I will go across the bottom. So I've gone up, back down to the corner. Now I will do my running stitch across the bottom over to the center of the house. That's where the purple felt is. And I'm just keeping those holes lined up as I go, and then I can come back to the corner and tie it off. And then I will do the exact same thing to the left side of the house. You can see how it has that nice kind of puffiness to it because of that piece of quilt batting that I put inside. So the last little detail I need to do before I close up and finish off the back of this hoop are add the little bats. Now these are cut from some inkwell felt, so black felt, and these are actually from the Erie Apothecary die set, but I think these are the perfect little embellishments. I did cut 3, but I only ended up using 2 of the little bats. And for each of these, I just did a running stitch across the bat and then back and then tied it off. Now to close up the back of the hoop, I like to use embroidery thread for this. This is a nice strong thread. I'm going to cut down my fabric. You can see the interfacing is starting to let go up there on the top. And I'm cutting it down to kind of match the circle. I do wish I had made my panel slightly wider. You can see on the edges I don't have a lot to work with. But I have a nice length of thread. I tied a knot at the end, and I am just going to whip stitch around this. So it doesn't have to be perfect. There's no real rules as to how big of stitches to use, but you're going to see as I go around all the way back to my starting point, and then I'll pull this and it will cinch up the back around the back of the hoop. Then we're going to lace it to hold it in place, and I will show you how I did that as well. So now I'm back to where my knot was, and I'm going to take one more stitch so I end up right at my knot, and then I'm going to pull it, and we're going to cinch up the back. Now to lace it, I'm going to pull it nice and tight, and kind of try to hold it with my fingers so it doesn't let go. And then what I'm going to do is pull my thread across the hoop to a place on the other side somewhere. I like to kind of get a little bit of fabric where those little ridges or bunches are that come up, and then this will help flatten it out. And you're just going to go back and forth across this hoop. Now I am going to have to get a couple more pieces of thread. Obviously, this one is not long enough to lace the entire back of this hoop, but I wanted to make it long enough to where you can do a couple of these, and that helps hold the thread that goes around in place. So I've just done about 4 or 5, and I'm to the point where I need to tie this off. So I'm going to hold this nice and tight, go back through the fabric again and tie a knot. And I actually like to tie 2 knots. So again, back through the fabric, through the loop of the thread, and tie a couple knots to just secure it. Then I can get another long length of thread and continue this process all the way around until it's nice and laced. It's going to look like a spider web on the back of this. So now I'm ready to lace the whole back of this, and I'm tying a knot in my thread. I will pull that through the fabric and then loop it through the fabric again and secure that by going through the thread and tying a knot into the fabric. And then I can really start going back and forth. And I like to grab little bites of fabric, kind of where those ridges were created when we pulled the string to cinch it up. That will really help smooth it out and pull it together and really pull it nice and taut. So we're just going to go back and forth across this, side to side, until you have it as smoothed out and as secure as you want. And then I'm tying this off, just going through the fabric, back through the loop of my thread a few times until it is nice and secure. And now we have this lovely finished embroidery hoop. And I'm actually going to take my pliers and make sure this is nice and tight. Now for the back, the one thing I did forget to do was to trace the hoop. So I just cut a 7-inch circle out of some paper, trace that onto a piece of felt, and I'm just cutting this out with my scissors. So this is going to fit right on the back. You could glue this if you wanted. I am going to sew it on with a blanket stitch, and I am going to also put a nice little bow at the top, which I actually forgot to film, but I just glued that on with hot glue. And I'm going to do that after I do my stitching along the back. So to do this, we're starting with 3 lengths of embroidery thread. This is nice and long so that we don't have to start a new one too many times. And I'm tying a knot at the end. I'm going to thread this up through my fabric so it comes out right at the hoop up there at the top. Then I'm going to take my piece of felt, layer it on top, go through the felt right back up to where my thread came out to start my first stitch. Then I can move over and do the next one. So down through the felt, through the fabric, up right at the hoop, and my thread is on the back side, so it's going to get caught, as you can see there, just like that, to create that blanket stitch look. So just make sure that that thread is on the back side and gets caught by the next stitch that comes up. Once you get all the way around, just tie it off at the top. I did forget to put my little name tag on the back, but I figured out a way to do that. So here is my finished hoop. I've already glued the bow on. Another option could be to put some trim around the hoop, or you could paint the hoop beforehand. There's lots of different options on things you could do. Now for the back side, what I actually ended up doing was getting a little extra scrap of fabric. I treated that with the Terrio Magic product to make it nice and stiff. And then I ironed my little tag onto that, cut it into a square, and I actually just glued this to the felt. Now, of course, to display this, you could add a little ribbon to hang it somewhere. You could put it on a little easel, just tuck it into your decor. I have a little stand here that fits perfectly from Chantel's 141 Design Company, but there are lots of options. So I hope you have found this tutorial helpful on how to do a felt stitching applique into a hoop, and I hope you have some ideas to make really fun haunted mansions for Halloween. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.